the senator, while indoctrinated, could not explain his toxicity.
Hello and welcome to HBR News number 194, Learn to Code, where we will reflect on the stories of the week and give it the Badger treatment. Hello everybody and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. I am your host Brian and I'm joined by, as always, my esteemed panelists, Hannah and the two mics. This is the HBR News Show and we have a great show lined up for you guys today, so please be sure to continue the conversations that we're having both in the chat as well as in the comments section. On this week's show, we're going to be talking about the layoffs and downsizing of several websites, the woman who was bullied into closing her small business, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and more. So stick around, it's going to be a good time. And also join us afterwards for the patron-only after show. I was struggling, so true story, I was struggling to find something to talk about and read for the after show. And I didn't have anything. And today, I was looking around. And fortunately, I realized the reason why I'm having a hard time finding stories to talk about. It's because of all these layoffs. It actually makes it harder for me to find things to discuss. But Vice.com hasn't fired their people yet. So I found a juicy bit of, let's call it journalism, that we can talk about in the after show. And we're just going to give you the title. It's called, It's Confirmed Women Are Higher Beings. They're Just Better Than Us. So yeah, we're going to talk about that.
I'm better than you? I guess I'm going a little further than you are. Yeah, I'm fucking better than you.
Sounds
sure
pretty clickbaity.
Yeah. Are they sure they're saying that women are better and not stoned?
No, they're higher beings, as in a new study shows, I get what you're getting, that how men's brains are geared towards selfishness and women's towards kindness. So no, they're just better than us. That's why we need to be more like them. So
then who the fuck is Ayn Rand? Hey.
Obviously, they were never on the end of bullying by other girls in junior high and high school.
Yeah, really. Well, this sounds backwards as fuck for tons of reasons. I mean, people are laughing in the chat. Men's brains are wired towards selfishness. Oh, okay. Okay,
that's why we have electricity and stuff. Because,
and plumbing.
Selfishness.
Yeah. Well, some of us have heat. Not all of us, though.
Yeah.
But, so if you want to be a part of the after show, you have to become a badger. And you can do that one of two ways. You can either go to patreon.com/honeybadgerradio and support us there, or I think this is even better if you don't want to support Patreon because of all of the BS that's been revolving around their recent actions. You can instead just go straight to the source and go to feedthebadger.com and become a monthly subscriber there. So go to feedthebadger.com, or, if you want, you can go to patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. And if you don't want to wake up one morning to find yourself unable to find our content because YouTube finally dropped the axe on our channels, then you need to go to badgerfeed.com. That's badgerfeed.com. So now let's get into the show. Before we get into the main stories, I want to give you guys a couple of brief stories. So first, this is just a little thing, because here's the thing about the Me Too movement, okay? The Me Too movement has basically created so many instances of people being accused of harassment, misconduct, assault, rape, or just plain being men in the wrong place at the wrong time, that we can't possibly do a story on it every time one breaks because they're too frequent. So instead, we're just getting to the point now, we're just going to make a mention of the latest person to be accused that would be of interest. So here we go. Dragon Ball Super Broly voice actor. So the voice actor for the character Broly from the Dragon Ball show has been accused of sexual harassment and homophobia. I just wanted to mention this to you. His name is Vic Mignona. I hope that's the correct way you say it. He was accused of sexual harassment because he has hugged his fans, people who show up to take photos with him and meet him, I'm not
And let me
shitting
guess,
you.
homophobia because he won't hug the male ones. Right?
Oh, even better. Even better.
No, even better. He was accused of homophobia because he would not sign a piece of yaoi fan art of Dragon Ball Z characters. And so, for those of you who don't know, yaoi, I think it's pronounced yaoi, right? It's basically male. It's homosexual relationships between men in manga. It's like a genre of essentially gay romance, right? And he wouldn't sign a piece of fan art featuring, I think, the character he voices, Brawly, and some other dude, probably Goku or something, who knows. And he wouldn't sign it, and the reason he wouldn't sign it wasn't because he's homophobic, as he released a letter saying that, you know, he has gay friends and all that, all the usual stuff that a normal person says and you would make you think that they aren't, but the kind of stuff that SJWs get angry at and think it's proof of homophobia. Oh, you say you have homo friends. Well, then that means you're homophobic. So because he said he wouldn't do it because he doesn't sign artwork that is non-canon. He thinks that if he signs it, it's kind of like giving an okay to it. So that is, somebody said I pronounced, you mean, I pronounced correctly, yaoi. Okay. So there is that. There's nothing else to say about it, except that as a consequence of this, Vic here is not going to be interacting with his fans anymore. He said it's not worth the risk, and he's not going to do it. And you know what? That's basically where all this is headed anyway, so what are you going to do? So that's the one story. Now, the other one that I've been hearing about that I thought I would share with you guys is there is a porn star named Riley Reid. And Riley Reid was asked about how she lost her virginity, and she decided to tell a story. So she did so in a few tweets. Tweet number 1, she says, I'm not going to include all of them, just like the highlights, right? She says, lost my virginity, responding to someone named Maddie B. Funny story, I raped a kid in a movie theater because I wanted to fuck and he kept saying no. That's how I lost it. And then follows up with another response to somebody else named Epstein89. She says, when I lost my virginity to a Brit that I raped, winky face, lol, he said no 3 times and I just got on that dick heart. LOL, he's like, no, not now. And someone responded saying, what the fuck? Now, I don't know, like, because Riley Reid has since deleted a lot of these tweets, I don't know what else happened, right? So, from what I understand, she got a lot of blowback for admitting to raping a boy when she was 16 and he was 14 in a movie theater. Now, of course, rape is her words, so I don't know if she's being hyperbolic. I don't know how true any of this is. And I really don't have an interest in participating in any kind of outrage culture, even when it is a woman joking about raping a man. I think that you basically just point out like the double standard, perhaps, but you don't have to attack Riley Reid over it. So
one thing I would like to point out,
yeah, go ahead,
is that for purely research purposes, if you were to look up a lot of Riley Reid's work, she has a lot of, shall we say, non-consensual role-play themes in her videos.
Mm-hmm.
So
that makes
I'm
sense.
just gonna toss that out there.
It does seem a lot like something she would make up to be spicy.
Edgy.
I mean, when the likes of Amy Schumer describe actually doing that, they don't come straight out and say I raped him because they don't think they can rape. You know, women, especially feminist women, for the most part, believe they're incapable of raping men.
I also want to point out that Riley Reid, if you've never seen her, is basically the porn star doppelganger of Lacey Green. They look very similar. So I think this whole time when we had, hashtag Lacey Green raped me, we had it wrong. It was supposed to be hashtag Riley Reid raped me.
Well,
have they ever been seen in the same room at the same time?
You can still start that hashtag.
I was this close away at VidCon. This close to getting Lacey Green to sign a picture of Riley Reid. I missed it by minutes.
That's funny. But Riley's kind of smaller on top, though. But go ahead, Hannah.
Honestly, the situation, yeah, if this was something that she really believed what she was saying, she wouldn't be saying it publicly. Not in the
Right.
current environment, unless she's really stupid.
No, I think that
Which,
she's she's kind of an edgy girl, like they were
yeah,
saying.
and that's my guess, is that she's trying to be edgy. Now, if the genders were reversed and the story was true, no adult man would be looking back going, yeah, I totally did this when I was
Oh, he'd be
16 or
strung up
14
in
or
the town
14
square yesterday.
no,
It
yeah,
would, well, it would be
they
a good comedy routine, actually. If you
Yeah.
did it on stage as a comedian, everyone would get the joke straight away. Like, I'm sure Louis C.K.'s done something
something.
like that.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, but definitely if the roles were reversed and the phrase "not right now" was uttered like that in the midst of the confession, so-called confession, there would be debate. So
Mm-hmm.
what happened after the statement "not right now"? Did she change her mind after further efforts? Because if she changed her mind and gave consent, that's still consent. Unless she was averse and said no and screamed and said stop and that kind of thing,
Yeah.
over and over again. But the same thing would be true with a guy. And you're in a public place like that. It's not really that hard to get help if you need it, because there will be other people there. And if you're yelling for help, somebody will come to your assistance. Well, at least if you're female. The same might not necessarily be true if it's a guy being assaulted by a girl. But at the very least, he could have embarrassed the shit out of her, And so
Mm-hmm.
I do have my doubts about this.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the way well, let me finish the story that I have. So, I tried to look up something more substantial, like if there was anything written about it, any articles. I couldn't find anything. And here's the thing, guys: if you put in, the search terms, I was like Riley Reid rape, and it doesn't really come up with anything that's relevant to this story, although you do get results. So it's the tough thing about looking up porn star stuff, like you're not going to find what you're looking for, but you might find something that other people are looking for, or what everyone else is looking for. But what I did find is that when I went to her Twitter, I found that she tweeted a response, and I was being told by people that she was freaking out at the massive amount of blowback that she got for her story about raping a 14-year-old boy. I also saw some YouTube videos, at least a couple, talking about it. And she tweeted this out: "Fuck everybody." And it was kind of a freak out moment, almost reminiscent of the August Ames story. I don't know if you guys remember August Ames. We did a story on her. She was another porn star that actually committed suicide because she said that she didn't want to do sex scenes with gay men. She didn't want to do any sex scenes with gay men, I believe it was, or with a gay man or a man who does gay porn. And the blowback she got was so intense, mostly from other porn stars, sort of porn star SJW types, that August Ames committed suicide. Now, I'm not saying that it's their fault she committed suicide. She was clearly in a state where such a thing could happen. But I'm just comparing the amount of freak out that Riley here had, which, from what I understand, was similar to August Ames. But this
do you have any more context than this? Because fuck everybody could be another joke.
Yeah, it could be.
No, I think there were a few other posts that indicated that she was
getting frustrated,
facing a little,
but
a little bit of a blowback.
Yeah, but they're gone
it's not
now.
Her job description.
So yeah, it's well, I mean, it is, but that's the thing. I don't have all the context. I know this could be another joke, but from what because she deleted everything else. But I do love this response to that original tweet, and I just thought I would share that. So,
yeah, see, everyone saw the joke. It's pretty obvious.
Yeah, it could. Well, some people treat it like a joke. Most people did, I think. But again, I'm not. I think that Riley was just, like I said, I think she was just being edgy. It could be true, but the fact is, there's just no way to know for sure, and people just say shit on the internet. So what are you gonna do? I wouldn't.
Yeah, unless somebody comes forward and says, "No, I was that guy, and I was actually traumatized, and I'm still upset about it," and all that. You're really not gonna. And she confirms, "Yep, that's the guy." Then there's really no proof that what she's saying is true.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't honestly would not waste outrage. Comparing a double standard, it's worth doing, but I would not waste outrage, and certainly wouldn't go after her for what she had to say.
Right.
I think it's been pointed out to her pretty efficiently and sufficiently that the joke kind of set off a few people's moral compasses.
Yeah, and I guess that for me, that's the takeaway. Again, it's not about attacking her. It's more like thinking, well, it seems like people do think that when a woman rapes a man, it's a problem for them. And I think that says something. I mean, that's my only takeaway, but that is my takeaway. So let me look at the super chats, and then we'll get into the actual main stories. These were just the brief ones that I thought deserved a mention. Crawl Dragon gives us $5 and says, "Not liking my porn equals not liking my palm equals prejudice. These guys literally complain about the same crap as furries now. We've gone too far, gentle furs." Yeah. Hokey gives us $1.99 and says, "What was he wearing?" I don't know the story.
He was wearing imagination.
Imagination.
He was wearing Reza Aslan's imagination. It's the most elaborate of all.
All right, so now we're ready to get into the main story. So I'm going to give it to Mike, right? We're going to talk about Assassin's Creed.
Glad you liked the title. So, the LGBTQ, some other letters that I probably forgot to put in because I'm a horrible bigot, is angry at Ubisoft over the latest DLC for Assassin's Creed Odyssey. In the DLC titled Shadow Heritage, it is revealed that the main character ultimately procreated and either gave birth, if playing as Cassandra, or fathered a child, if playing as Alexios, because, the game you can play as male or female. The anger stems from the fact that up until this point in the game, the player could be, through decisions made in the story, be role-playing as a gay or lesbian character, or you can just forego having a relationship at all. I forgot to put that in there, but that's something you can do. Instead of standing by the story they crafted, Ubisoft bowed to the mob and will be changing the game. On the Ubisoft forums, a community manager stated the following, quote, "After hearing player feedback and discussing within the development team, we are making changes to a cutscene and some dialogue in Shadow Heritage to better reflect the nature of the relationship for players selecting a non-romantic storyline. These changes, along with renaming a trophy/achievement, are being made now and will be implemented in an upcoming patch. We've also been carefully looking at the next episode, Bloodline, to ensure the paths that players experience mirror the choices they make in-game." End quote. LGBTQ activists were quick to praise Ubisoft for seeing the error of their ways, with the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, also known as GLAAD, stating in a tweet, quote, "We are pleased that Ubisoft has listened to LGBTQ players and will be making changes to Assassin's Creed. This is an important first step towards mitigating the damage done by the game's latest DLC."
Wow. Bowing to the mob. Once again.
And isn't this the same group of people that keeps calling us entitled man babies for voicing concerns?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Except, we're not bitching about characters' gender identities in a game. It's more like, hey, can we not have loot boxes? Can the next Diablo not be a fucking cell phone game?
Yeah,
Can
really.
BioWare ever produce good game ever again?
Well, hell, they get PO'd if players are not happy, if gamers are not happy when, or moviegoers or readers that are excited that a movie is coming out, whether it's regular book readers or comic book readers or whatever. When a movie is coming out and a beloved character is being portrayed, by the opposite sex, or as being a different sexuality than they are in the story, or by a different ethnic background, like a dramatically different ethnic background, and so on. They don't seem to have any problem getting upset when other people's uh, uh, attachments to characters in game and to storylines in game are pissed on. So essentially, they're bothered by exactly the same thing that they've spent the last couple of years telling us that none of us should be upset about. They're only upset when it happens to them. So I gotta, kind of turn it around on them. If you're damaged, like the damage done, if you're damaged by not being able to properly continue your story in a game, you might want to check your priorities, especially if you've just spent the last couple of years telling everybody else they shouldn't have that problem.
Yeah. If you can't have characters that can participate in recreation and the birth of a new generation, you're kind of restricting your storylines quite a lot, because that's a thing that happens quite a lot.
Yeah, really.
Especially, with the next chapter being called Bloodlines, that kind of implies something.
We're
all just homophobic. That's all it is.
Yeah, that's what it is. I think
other thing.
Yeah.
I want to point out that in the last several years, every time there's been some bit of research or another that has confirmed that homosexuality is hereditary, I always see it shared by my LGBT friends. So clearly there's reproduction that's taking place that's passing on DNA, or at least they'd like to believe. Whether the research is accurate or not, at least they'd like to believe there's reproduction taking place that passes on DNA that it makes people more likely to be gay. So, and this doesn't necessarily have to come from straight people. There's such a thing as artificial insemination. There's other things that can happen that can lead to reproduction. If somebody wants to reproduce, all they have to do is find a partner. You don't have to be happy about the sex to get what you want out of it, So the storyline doesn't have to ungay gay people permanently to achieve its ends.
Yeah, I think that the acronym GLAD is a little bit misplaced. I see how it works, like it spells out the words, but it doesn't seem to fit very well. Because I don't see a lot of happiness coming out of these people. And
this is why they're called gay in the first place. This is why they, at least the men on that side of the movement, decided to go with the word gay. Because, apart from one thing, that they definitely will never have children, and therefore will be happier than anyone who ever will. But also because camp men come across as, happy, as that sort of floaty happy, like gay. And the lesbians kind of went, we don't feel that way. We're fucking angry.
Yeah.
You're lucky they didn't call it the grouchy lifestyle.
I just want to be clear that this isn't an issue with gay people or LGBTQ people. This is a problem with LGBTQ activists. And that's night and day. That's like women and feminists. It's completely different. And this gay and lesbian alliance against defamation, that sounds a lot like the SPLC and the Anti-Defamation League, the ADL. They go by those people are very, very much politically, let's say, entrenched, and they don't represent the people that they claim to want to defend most of the time.
They're insidious, actually. They'll actually attack people who are gay, who are lesbian, who are trans. They'll attack anybody that doesn't uphold their agenda or that opposes their agenda in any way. And they have pushed their agenda into schools. They have pushed their agenda on businesses. They've pushed for changes in law and policy that are not necessarily pro-gay, but anti-everybody else. So, that's an organization I have no use for.
Absolutely. So, I guess in closing, I wasn't supporting Ubisoft much. and I don't think I'm going to be, because they're basically, they are bowing down to the people who are the least likely to buy their product. And this is a mistake that these corporations make all too often. I'm only speaking for myself. You guys let me know what you think about that. Is this just another example of them kissing the ring? I would say yes. And people should know about it. And that's the reason why I'm reporting on it, because Gamergate is still going on despite what people want you to think. Crawl Dragon gives us $5 and says, they should have gone the other way and had gay players go full Schwarzenegger from Junior with their male lovers. Wow, 2 furry jokes in a row. The movie's Junior. It's when Schwarzenegger gets pregnant. And that was actually one of the things, too, about this was originally, these games were, you were playing an ancestor of the main character whose name I can't, it's like Desmond something or other. But I only played the first couple of Assassin's Creeds, and I stopped as soon as they decided that they were going to stick to the Ezio storyline for a couple more games. I felt like they were going to milk the franchise. And I said, you know what? I think they're going to milk the franchise.
Was actually the best.
Yeah. So, but I mean, I lost interest in.
I understand.
In that, so I was worried they were going to milk the franchise, and I was right.
Yeah. Well, it's Ubisoft. They do their game of year bullshit.
Yeah, they do. Except they don't give us Prince of Persia. God damn it. So, or come up with something new. But yeah, anyway, tell us what you guys think in the comments. Does anybody have any final thoughts on this before we move on?
I wouldn't see a problem with them offering something that doesn't affect the game for anybody that doesn't want it to. You can buy a patch that'll provide a backstory that'll explain this in the next episode in such a way that it doesn't interfere with the character having done whatever you played the character to have done in the previous game. However you imagined your character, it doesn't interfere and still allows for the continuing story to be as it is. Basically an explanation for how this happened for that particular character path. And that's just essentially filling plot holes. In one of the potential storylines. That shouldn't be a problem. That should be any other situation, if they left something out or screwed something up like that, that would be no problem. Them coming out with something like that. It shouldn't be controversial. It's if it's going to be inflicted on everybody, whether they want it or not, and change what they're doing to suit, what this select group is doing, then it's a problem.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, most games let you do that, especially the ones that let you custom make your own characters. But I think that with this Assassin's Creed thing, it's a bit of a stretch. I know that they moved away from the whole, it's all about Desmond and all of his ancestry. And if you looked at it in that context, Odyssey makes no sense, because there's no way that he could have an ancestor
that's apparently that's been retconned.
Yeah, they retconned
done differently ever since Syndicate.
Yeah.
Desmond hasn't even been in the picture since Assassin's Creed 3.
Well, whatever. That's their decision. It's almost like, well, what are we building all this up for?
It's kind of already peaked. Like the modern day storyline is just a total afterthought now. It's like, it's some other random characters doing random stuff, and they gotta use the thing to relive the memories of this random other thing, and that's going to be the main set piece of the game.
Oh, brother. Okay, well. Yeah, okay. All right, fine. I don't know what else to say. Let's move on to the next story. Tell us what you guys think anyways. I haven't played anything past 2, so maybe I just don't know what the fuck I'm talking about. Okay, so let's see. Here we go. So imagine that you've left the police force and you're looking to start your own business. You want your own fish and chips restaurant, but you kind of suck at puns. And we all know that all startups, they have to have a pun in their name. Not only are you an ex-cop, but you're also a former victim of domestic violence. And not to mention an Aussie, dealing with heat and some of the most deadliest animals on Earth. Having a innate dark sense of humor, you decide to call your restaurant The Battered Wife, adding the only battering anyone need know. Get it? Because the fish are battered. And then, get it? Well, you listen to this show, you probably know what's going to happen next. Like if you dare to call your restaurant the Battered Wife. Men saw that restaurant name and began hitting their wives. It was the positive reinforcement that they were waiting for. They were just looking for permission to do it. It was an epidemic Australian hospitals could not keep up with.
But then they found their Gillette razor, and it was all okay.
Yeah, right. But then they got Gillette razors, and everything changed. No, actually, what really happened was there was a witch hunt on the person who opened this business to actually attack the woman, this dangerous, dangerous woman. It turns out the most dangerous animals in Australia are actually just feminists. So the woman, named Mrs. Kerr, again, a former domestic violence victim herself and an ex-cop, took to social media and tearfully informed listeners that, quote, the battered wife will cease trading, end quote. I've been a subject of an abusive witch hunt by a not-for-profit organization who are supposed to be anti-abuse. However, they threatened to throw bricks through my window. They complained to the ASIC to have my business name revoked, but I got through that one, she said. Her entire property is for sale, but she says that her biggest disappointment is informing her team that they no longer have a job. Mrs. Kerr says the suggestion that her shop name was promoting domestic violence is, quote, ludicrous, elaborating in an interview. Quote, there is a lot of beautiful, intelligent women out there in really bad situations, and to assume I was making light of the subject, that I was promoting it, no one is going to walk past my shop and say, the battered wife, hey, how about we take some advice on this? End quote. But you forget, woman, that feminists know the truth about the way that things are socialized. If you say that, you normalize violence against women, and you know that you can't have that. Okay, so
whenever anyone comes up with a name for their shop, it goes into this. I don't know if it's a copyright thing, but it means no one else in the country can use that name. Or no band can use either, because very often like a band will get famous, and then they find out there's a tiny little like store somewhere in Nebraska that has that same name, and they can get sued by that. And it works the same way in Australia and Britain, I presume. So, just like how difficult it is to come up with a new YouTube username, it's really fucking difficult to come up with a new pun for your store that hasn't been used yet. So you got to go for the less obvious ones, like battered wife. There's a women's clothing store in London I saw called Sweaty Betty. Right? So that's the bottom of the barrel they're scraping now.
yeah.
You know, I
Give
just
them a break.
I just got to point out that in response to their own emotional sort of knee-jerk reaction to this store name, these people who supposedly make it their profession to oppose violence against women and to help women who have been subject to violence against women, threaten to engage in violence against a woman who was a victim of the type of violence that they claim to oppose. They actually threatened violence. Throwing a brick through somebody's window is an act of violence.
Yep.
I mean, how hypocritical. It's not just hypocritical, it's outright betraying your true self. The mask came off. They are more interested in having control over the dialogue than they are in actually seeing women recover from domestic violence. They're more interested in controlling the dialogue than they are in allowing any kind of domestic violence victim to have independence. You know, they certainly don't want her to be no longer traumatized. They don't want her to be afraid to talk, or to be unafraid to talk about it, much less unafraid to joke about it. So, you know, how dare she live on her own? How dare she work on her own? And how dare she not fit their model on how a domestic violence victim is supposed to look? Of course, they threatened to throw bricks through her windows. They had to get her back in line.
Yep. They couldn't stand that she had a sense of humor, that she could be strong in the face of her history and make light of it. I'm going to take her word for it. Let's assume that she was indeed a victim of domestic violence and it wasn't a two-way street for whatever reason. Even if that was the case, the fact that she was able to say, like, look back on her history, maybe learn something from it, laugh it off and say, you know what, I'm way past this now. I'm going to open my own business. And I'm going to make light of my own history, of my own experience. And maybe it's a way of her, like moving on or whatever. And they took it as, no, your experience as a woman, however you choose to process it, is inconvenient to the other women. Right? And so we know what's best for you.
You must be mired in victimhood and self-pity.
You're not thinking about the rest of us.
Stay down here with the rest of us. Exactly.
Right. You're not thinking about the rest of us. You're not thinking about other victims.
In a bucket.
That's right.
Pretty much. It's not like we haven't seen that before. I mean, there's nothing like an establishment organization that makes millions of dollars, telling a sexual assault victim that she's not allowed to deal with the trauma of her experiences by using graveyard humor.
Yep.
How dare you make rape jokes, right? So, like, this is something I can totally sympathize with, because I've seen it up close and personal. You cannot tell people how to recover from their experiences and expect to be afforded credibility as a representative of people trying to recover from traumatic experiences.
Yep. So we got a super chat from Hokie, who says, it's a shame that, ironically, only straight white men have permission to have diversity of thought. Gives us $5. Thank you, everybody, for your kind donations. Yeah, you're right. It is a shame. Only white men are allowed to have diversity of thought. That's why this whole, this whole fourth wave intersectional shit, it's as bad for the groups that are supposed to be under the protection of these people as it is for the people who they make their enemy. In that, you might destroy your enemy quickly, but you'll destroy your allies slowly because you're going to take away their will to be anything outside of the box that you put them in. And ironically, they cry about other people who are the bigots that are putting them into boxes. So yeah, it's a shame.
I think it's an old Roman saying, if you have an enemy, when he's hungry, feed him. When he needs clothing, clothe him. Nothing will make him weaker. Something like that.
Yeah.
And you can see where they're coming from. It's the soft bigotry of low expectations. Is you leave people to atrophy if you do everything for them.
Exactly. All right, so let us know what you guys think about this story, the battered wife, and also if you guys have seen any funny pun names for businesses, put them down below. I'd like to see some funny startup businesses. They always have these funny little names. All right, so moving on to the next story. This is one of the big ones. Journalists being let go from various media groups. 1,000 people. That's a lot. From places such as the Huffington Post, Verizon's media group, and BuzzFeed have been let go from their jobs. Many of the vocal ones are people who are so-called journalists, but people who are in more support staff roles such as IT and advertising, well, they've been let go of also. Many of these media outlets have been criticized recently because of their coverage of various news topics, especially because their fact-checking of stories has been, let's say, less than adequate. There are plenty of recent stories, from the media handling of hashtag Covington Gate, hashtag Smiling While White, to BuzzFeed's disputed report about Michael Cohen being told to lie to Congress. So,
if there's anything we learned from the fucking Covington mess, is that the media create stories and then talk about them. There's other stories to talk about, but so often the biggest story in the media is some stupid shit the media did. Like they create the stories and then report on them.
Yeah.
Which is a very bad place to be getting yourself into.
And this has actually given rise to the Learn to Code meme, which is the name of this show. And, for those of you who may not know the story, why is this Learn to Code thing so funny? Well, there was a period where a lot of these same journalists were essentially decrying and making light of a lot of blue-collar workers, especially in middle America, who voted for Trump because they needed jobs, because they were looking for work, and the sort of blue collar class in middle America, in the flyover states, that was a big concern for them. And a lot of these journalists, they said, well, learn to code. We're going into the tech, we're moving forward into the tech industry. And you need to let go of those old timey jobs that apparently nobody does anymore, because you can code coal into existence, apparently. So now that they've lost,
never be under the chopping block.
Yes,
journalism will never be a ye olde type thing.
Also, I want to also point something else out that I think is really great to think about. While these sites are letting people go, and additionally, Mike.com, they fired a bunch of their staff members in December. So this is kind of across most of these platforms. Independent media is growing. So, that's also something of interest. Now, of course, only as long as Silicon Valley allows it to be the case. But for now, it seems like people who are creating independent content that it operates outside of the mainstream media, outside of what is considered to be accepted journalism, their platforms are getting larger. Sargon has basically just, as an example, he's just one guy, right? He just hired a small team to help him put, to gather research, to organize, and all that, so that they can have, he can essentially make his show better. And this is happening everywhere. So yeah, I think that you guys should be seeing that there seems to be a change in the wind. I'm going to be, a little bit hesitant in my optimism, but things do look pretty good.
Yeah, these guys fucked up entirely by themselves. The only reason Alex Jones isn't around anymore is because they got him taken down. It's fucking bizarre how much traffic would he have right now if they hadn't done that?
Yeah, he's still around. He's just not in the public eye. That's the thing. They got him silenced, but not completely. So he's sort of still crippled and hobbling along. But one thing that I would point out, we shouldn't afford them the level of credibility to be called journalists unless they actually are journalists. And I like the American Press Institute's definition. The American Press Institute defines journalism as the activity of gathering, assessing, creating, and presenting news and information. And then the site goes on to basically say, the value of the information that comes from the purpose of providing people with verified information they can use to make better decisions as the thing that differentiates journalism from other forms of communication. So you can be a gossip columnist. That doesn't make you necessarily a journalist unless you are verifying what you're gossiping about, and the information is useful to other people in their decision-making purposes. You can write about anything and call yourself a journalist, but you're not really, unless you are actually reporting information that people need. And like throughout the description, and there's actually several pages of description as going into what actually is journalism and what makes it journalism versus other things. It explains the purpose of journalism, the elements of journalism, what does a journalist do, and everything. I would read that, and if somebody in the media isn't living up to that description, don't call them journalists. Call them other things. Call them commentators. Call them media personalities. Call them gossip columnists. Call them advice columnists. But they're not journalists.
Right.
And that distinction, just like the distinction of, I don't know, doctors should be reserved for somebody who actually practices medicine, or somebody who has earned a doctorate.
Yeah,
And medical doctor
PhD.
for medical practitioners versus, doctor of for doctorate holders. That this is something that deserves that level of seriousness, because people take their news seriously. And
Yeah.
even in today's era of calling out fake news, people take their news sources seriously. And there are people who will believe things based on what news source it came from. So in my opinion, like, as a commentator, and that's mostly what I do, is act as a commentator. Uh, Honestly, don't go calling reporters journalists unless they are engaging in genuine journalism.
Yeah, facts. You
Yeah.
have to deal exclusively in facts to be a journalist. Unfortunately, we're in a world where facts are whatever you feel like they are, and very often the editors in charge of these journalists themselves have this issue with what a fact is. It's just what they want to believe. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to call them prostitutes or propagandists, basically, is what they are. Prostitutes and propagandists.
I like prostitutes. That's
Yeah.
a good word for a lot of these. And then they engage in prestidigitation.
Yes. All right. So let us know what you guys think about this story as well. Do you think that this is the start of a trend? Do you think things are going to get better in that regard? I'd like to know what you guys think about that, or should we just hold off? Also, related to that, briefly. So there's this. You may have heard of this small. It was a small YouTube channel called Dorkly that became a website, and Dorkly used to make these funny little videos with using like video game sprites, and they were like these little skit comedies. But then they started to grow and expand, and they started making different kinds of content, and they got pretty SJW-y, right? Like, I would say definitely. They're definitely feminists, and they definitely started doing that kind of content. And all of a sudden, just a couple days ago, they announced they put out a notice saying that Dorkly.com is going to be moving away from its normal focus, so basically they're also downsizing, and they're going to be changing where they live. And I think that this could be related, but if you guys know more about this, then let us know. But you may have heard of Dorkly.com. I used to like watching their videos, but then they started doing some pro-feminist shit in their channel, and I unsubscribed as soon as I saw they were heading in that direction. Which, by the way, if you had this like leisure thing that you like to watch, like a channel that did funny stuff, or it was in analytical or whatever, and you didn't know if they were feminists or not, and it turns out that they are, it's not really something to be disappointed in. I think it's normal. That's normal. Like, if it turns out to be that they're
absolutely do not do that with your music collection, because it's pinkos across the board, I'm afraid.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Just try to enjoy it for what it is, and if someone turns out to be red pilled, then hurrah. But most people, it's not going to work out that way. So
honestly, it's if you are if you're looking at any area of entertainment, you're going to find that, whether it's music, movies, dance, any of the areas of art, it's all that's basically where all the communists went. But in terms of actually knowing based on their work, if their work started out, you didn't know their political views because their work didn't espouse or promote their political views, and now it does, that's something that's legitimately disappointing, and you're completely valid in your disappointment there.
Yeah. Okay, so that is that story. Tell us what you think. And now I think we're going to the last story. So this one is, again, for Mike J. So, Mike, if you could.
So we previously touched on it just a little bit in that last story, but we're gonna really now get into the guts of it. Hashtag Smirkgate, as I've taken to calling it. So, after being dragged through the mud by nearly every left-leaning media outlet, Nicholas Sandman, which, by the way, goddamn, that's just a badass last name to have.
You know, whenever I hear it, I think that he's gonna start. Like, if we ever talk to him, he's gonna start by saying, "Hello, everyone, Sandman here." But he's not the MGTOW Sandman, just so you guys know. He's not that Sandman. He's a different Sandman. But it is a pretty badass name.
We're off to Never Land.
So, Nicholas Sandman and his family are ready to fight back. To recap, and this is going to be a pretty lengthy recap, Sandman, as well as other students from Covington Catholic, a Kentucky-based private high school, were in Washington, D.C. to attend the March for Life rally. While waiting at the Lincoln Memorial for their bus to arrive, they were engaged by another group at the rally called the, you can't make this up, Black Hebrew Israelites.
Oh, I think...
Hebrew Israelites, that's right.
Yeah,
That's right!
That's right!
Black Hebrew Israelites verbally attacked the students, calling them, quote, incest babies, future school shooters, dirty-ass crackers, and many other much worse vulgarities. While arguing with this group, a group of Native American protesters led by Nathan Phillips entered between the two groups and began singing and drumming a Native American protest song. The students, who seemed confused at Phillips' display, clapped along to his drumming, kind of like going along with it, because it seemed like he was on their side for a bit there. Phillips then made his way through the group of students, many of whom stepped aside as he proceeded deeper into the group. Phillips then stopped in front of Sandman, who stood his ground and smiled, clearly bemused by the situation, which, gets us that iconic picture there that's been plastered everywhere. As Phillips continued to bang his drum inches away from Sandman's face.
The smirk that stopped the earth from turning.
Yes. Smirk that launched 1,000 tweets.
I'm thinking of cordoning off another area of Hyde Park and calling it Smirker's Corner. Just for anyone. Feels like having a smirk.
You got to make sure you get a license for that smirk.
Yeah, right.
So, and this was basically the end of the confrontation. Like, you can watch the I think it was like a 2-hour live stream that somebody saved, and really nothing else of note happened. I think the Indians just kind of eventually went away. The students kept sort of engaging with the Black Hebrew Israelites, and then it just sort of ended. Mm-hmm. Anyway, the media quickly picked up the story and ran with it, painting Sandman and his fellow students as racists and harassers. Nathan Phillips, the Indian guy, also known as Smallpox Skrillex, stoked the flames.
I had no idea he was in the Skrillex video when I gave him that.
Yep.
Just one of those glorious.
Whoa, Kimosabi.
Happy coincidences. Anyway, Phillips stoked the fire by playing the victim and insisting that the students had hurled insults at him and chanted, "Build the wall." Claims, by the way, that can be proven false based on video evidence of the event shot from multiple angles. But by the time independent fact-checkers were able to call out his lies, the damage was done and the narrative was set in stone. Progressives began calling for blood on social media. Soon the Covington Catholic students and Sandman himself were receiving numerous death threats, and the high school needed to be shut down temporarily due to threats of violence.
That's literal blood. Like, literally calling for blood. So
yes,
just for people to know, they were literally calling for blood. Even after the facts came out, the damage control done by the journalists was just absolutely vile and reprehensible. CNN, holy shit, they are a fucking joke. Okay, go ahead.
Not to mention all the people who tweeted that out. Hey, what are you going to do about this at Twitter? Okay, well, what about everyone telling journalists to learn to code?
Yeah, exactly.
So while the truth began to slowly trickle out, the progressives doubled and tripled down. They kept reaching for the stupidest and stupidest of stuff. They found a bunch of like a decade ago at a baseball or a basketball game. They noticed that there were pictures of all the students painted black. This is clearly blackface.
Yeah,
and it's like,
right.
Actually, no. This just shows that these people never went to a single function at their high school aside from the journalism and LGBTQ IAP activism club.
Yeah.
If you had ever gone to a game, you'd know sometimes they do what's known as a colors game. And it's basically everyone wears a certain color. And if you're really hardcore, you paint yourself that color.
Mm-hmm.
Blue, it can be white. It's usually the school's
School colors,
But sometimes you have what's a blackout game, and you all wear black, or you paint yourself entirely black, and it's cool. They turn out the lights in the gym. Sometimes they pass around glow sticks. It's not blackface. But you can't tell them that. And they did a couple of other stupid things trying to. They had in a couple of other videos in this video you can hear some kids in the same sort of area saying build the wall, and you can't even it's not even proven it was the same kids. And then they dug through that lady's Twitter history, and boy howdy did she like saying the N-word.
Yeah, sure.
It just occurred to me if it's offensive for white people to dress up as black because white people oppress black people, then surely it's offensive for men to dress up as women because men oppress women.
Whoa.
Actually,
that is spicy.
TERFs do make that argument.
I burned my tongue on that.
Do make that argument. That is actually an argument that does get made, but it doesn't come from regular feminists. It comes from TERFs.
The feminists that even feminists hate.
Yeah, the trans-exclusionary radical feminists.
The only ideologically consistent feminists, to be honest.
Of course. Yeah, and they're the ones that are just the most openly, overtly violent and crazy and mean. So that really tells you a lot about feminism.
Mm-hmm.
So, this story, what I said previously when it was posted in our chat, I think that's my biggest takeaway from this is the differences in how men are aggressive versus how women are aggressive, and what roles men fill as they get older, that they're sort of intrinsic to each other. Because aggressiveness isn't necessarily the same thing as violence. You're being aggressive toward your challenges when you face them head on and strive to overcome them. One of the things that my coach used to say when I ran cross country, and various courses would have various topography to deal with. So sometimes you would be going up a hill. He didn't say run up the hill. It was attack that hill. And it's one of men's strengths that they have that tendency to attack the hill. You got to finish this job, and your means of dealing with it is to aggressively address the problem, right? But when you replace that accountability that goes with it, when you replace what is men's position in the world, they are the providers, the protectors, the builders, the mentors, the people who get things done and keep things going, right? Mm-hmm. And you replace that accountable masculine role, that identity, with the unaccountable female victim identity, which is what happens in identity cult mentalities, whether it's because of ethnic backgrounds, because of religious backgrounds, because of sexuality, whatever. When you take a man and you shove that down his throat and you push that accountability out and replace it with that's poison, right? It's like brain cancer. It changes everything about who you are. And it poisons it so badly that he'll be the opposite of what he would have been. So this guy, in his culture, He would normally have been the person young men would go to the grandfather, basically, to ask questions of, I'm having this thing going on in my life and I can't quite figure it out. What am I missing? It's the old man, the elder, is
Yeah.
the person that you ask about that, right? But instead, because his primary means of communicating his interest is passive aggression now, because he's stuck with this relational aggression, and it's unaccountable relational aggression. He has no compunctions about being exactly the opposite. Instead of being the mentor, he's directing violence at these kids, and it's proxy
Yeah.
violence.
He's the
He's
child.
directing other people's violence. It's even worse. He's the feminist woman.
Mm-hmm.
He's directing other people's violence at
Oof.
boys for being something other than what he approves. What he and his group unleashed, that is exactly what feminist women do. It's exactly what false accusers do. What particularly female false accusers who accuse things like domestic violence and rape. The only other things that you can level or leverage that kind of social violence with is accusations of racism, and it doesn't matter if they're true or false. We hear all the time that the kind of treatment these kids got, the death threats and the violent threats and everything, that this happens to women with a platform. This is basically, if you're a female and you have a platform, this is what you have to deal with, um, just because they're women. And yet this shows that gender has nothing to do with being on the receiving end of that. But the victim identity cult has everything to do with being on the leveraging end of it. Basically, that's what you turn into no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
And they've ruined this guy's masculinity. They've ruined who he would be as he aged. They've broken him. And he may be complicit in that. He may have looked at this and in his own life and said, well, this is how I can gain power. This is how I can get my point across. This is how I can make money, whatever. But that had to exist first. That had to be a thing, a regular thing, before he was going to do that. And it's really sad, in my opinion, that we turn any men into this. It's bad that women do this, but it's terrible to take the balance and strength in society, the people who don't have that tendency, the men, and turn them into it too.
Mm-hmm.
Tiny bit left on the
Yeah,
write-up.
I want to say more, but I think there's more left on the write-up. I want to comment on this too, but this is the good part. I think the big part. So go ahead.
So returning to the beginning of it, since that time, the Sandman family has hired lawyer L. Lynn Wood, who was known for, quote, aggressive libel and slander suits against media organizations. Additionally, those who threatened the students directly on social media may also be receiving punishment, as an investigation is, quote, already underway. And that comes from, according to the Kentucky prosecutor, Rob Sanders. He had a spot on, I think it was Laura Ingram's show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on Laura Ingram's show. And he was saying that, like, oh yeah, detectives have been in and out of my office all day. We're going to start with the people here in Kentucky first, and then we're going to see about possibly extraditing people from other states if we can track them down. Because if I think, according to him, it may be a felony what some of them did, and you can do that if it's a felony.
Yeah. So the media is in more trouble, and this kid, I've seen things he's written, things he's talked about. Here, I'll go back to the scene here. I want to show you guys the tweet that he made. This is pretty good. He actually put, I love this. This kid used the smirk photo as his profile pic on, I believe this is on Twitter. He responded to Reza Aslan, who said, honest question, have you ever seen a more punchable face than this kid's? And Sandman says, we're saving content like this, and we will be seeing you in court. One bit of advice I can give to the radical/socialist left. Fear my generation. We aren't buying what you're selling. We believe in the American Constitution and protecting our nation, not anyone else's. So, not bad for a teenager. I know I wasn't thinking about that shit when I was 16. So, I don't know. I would say that that's worthy of some praise. And since we're at the end, this is the last story. The thing I also wanted to say is that what we're looking at here, I think, this event, when I saw it break, I didn't really look very closely at it because I didn't think there was much to it. It was a non-controversy, right? I figured it was just going to blow over. But the fact that it was a non-controversy is why it became such a huge deal. I mean, it was just a crazy big story that got way bigger than it should have, but it's the only thing people could talk about. And then when I saw how the media reacted to it by doubling down over and over, I think there was a segment I saw on CNN where Chris Cuomo was saying, I think he was talking to Don Lemon, but I'm not sure. It was one of those CNN talking heads. And he basically said that despite all of the new info that came out, despite everything dealing with the Black Hebrew Israelites and all that, the kids are still at fault because they wore the hat. It was basically like, it was victim blaming when a woman gets raped by saying, what was she wearing, right? Did she provoke them by wearing, skimpy clothing? Except that, of course, when you do it with these white Christian boys, it's totally okay.
Brian, you can't expect these people to live up to their own standards.
No,
it's
of course
just
not.
impossible for them.
No.
You can totally judge the person, by what they're wearing as long as they're on the other side. I mean, wasn't it like less than a year ago we couldn't criticize any children or students for anything because of those
David Hogg? I pointed that out. I said that so it's okay for us to demonize these kids, but we're not. Does that mean we can go back to talking shit about David Hogg and Emma Gonzalez or whatever her name was? No, of course not. It's not about. I mean, it's just like it's about whatever's convenient, right? But this is the bigger thing. Yeah, the media is in trouble. They've been laying people off, and CNN's ratings have been dropping. And of course, because they can't stop doubling down, it's just going to make them look worse and worse. And looks like there's going to be legal ramifications, and there should be absolutely legal ramifications. I think more people need to do this shit. And this kid has a lot of guts, by the way, for everything that he's displayed. I look at that face that people say it's a smirk, and I think that he was genuinely afraid. Because he didn't know what was going to happen. Imagine that, right? You have, like, the Black Israelites yelling slurs at you, like you're your enemy, and then this Native American guy walks up, and it looks like you're the enemy to everybody else around you. And you're at, like, I think the Women's March was close by or something, too. So you're just surrounded by people that are ideologically opposed to you strongly. You're a teenage boy, there with your classmates, And I think he was afraid. I think that was he was trying to make a face that I guess would like allow him to power through that, but I think he was genuinely worried. But what's even more important than that, what I was trying to get at, is this is actually related to the Gillette ad. So I'll tell you why I think it's related. I was talking to Alison about it in the morning, but these are my thoughts, okay? The Gillette ad basically calls, if you look at the general thrust of the ad, it is basically saying that men do evil, and the only people that can stop them is other men. And in most of the cases, the other men are non-white men, and the men that have to be stopped are the white men. So it is a radical feminist, a fourth waiver, put this ad together, and a bunch of either spineless cucks or also feminists. I'm leaning towards the latter, but probably a combination of both. They signed off on it and they said, yes, this looks good. And we're going to put that ad out there because we believe that that is the truth. And that narrative is repeated over and over ad nauseum through academia, through the media, through television shows, through more commercials. And I predicted that when the Super Bowl comes, it's going to get worse. When the Super Bowl ads come out, I bet there's going to be a couple of them that talk about toxic masculinity. I guarantee that. I guarantee it. So what I think that we're seeing, and this is not a new thing, this has just been going on for a while, and this is a really good example of it, is the ways in which men who don't have a sense of unified purpose, like men don't, today, don't see themselves as part of the group called men. They see themselves as part of a group, a subset group within that, right? So the Native American guy, the Black Hebrew Israelites are a cult. Sure, they're nuts, absolutely, but they're guys that are desperately looking for an identity, a place to belong. And that's the reason why they're doing that, is because they don't feel like they can belong to just being men. They can't even just belong to being black men, because for them it's not enough. And I mean, I make fun of them too, but if you look at it, it's really fucked up. And this Native American guy, again, like Hannah said, he's not acting in the way that you would, an adult would behave. He's not even acting like in ways that the Christian teenage boy was far more mature. And I know that guy is, basically a liar and an activist and a scam artist and all that. But ultimately what I'm seeing is men that are politically weaponized against other men because they don't see the ways in which they have more in common than not. And I think that this narrative is the product, is the catalyst for this. It's created this atmosphere, Like, I couldn't tell you of a time where it was illegal to wear a hat that said MAGA, on it, or anything like that. And I mean, like, there are people saying that, he shouldn't have. They were chanting "Build that wall," even though they weren't. But if they were, who cares? Why does that matter? Like, I mean, they weren't, but so what if they were? And if you see, the thing that's interesting about this whole situation is, if it would have gone to violence, the only people hurt would have been men in this situation. And women would have been completely safe from it. But they are the reason why, I'm not women, but feminist women, are the reason why we're at this point. Everyone's talking about this. They're afraid of this culture war turning into a civil war. If it does, the only way that it's going to happen is if you weaponize masculinity by using other masculinity as a threat to everything. And this is, I think, a product of that, I think that this is what we're looking at. I think that this is basically what happens when you take away male identity, you demonize it, you shit on it, and then you ask men to try to find a place to belong. And they have no place to go. So what you say is, well, what you do is you belong to, this other political group, or you go find something. Like, you become a Black Hebrew Israelite. I mean, I'm sad for those guys, because as hilarious as they are, they could just be productive members of society with jobs and homes and families. But instead, they're walking around screaming at people because they don't have a place to be. And I mean, I think that is an important thing to remember. So those are my thoughts on that.
It's not just feminist women that are a cause behind that. Actually, that's gynocentrism. Those men over there are a threat to our women.
Yeah, exactly.
Those men over there are the bad guys. And honestly, the kids were at a pro-life rally, and I support that. I would support that even if I wasn't pro-life. Their right to contribute to that discussion. If there was a pro-choice rally and there were guys at a pro-choice rally and somebody did that to them, they have the right to be there. Men have the right to an opinion on abortion. But when men express a non-gynocentric opinion on abortion, an opinion that would lead to more female accountability if it actually was put into law, suddenly they're bad guys. They're those guys over there. And a lot of these men probably felt entitled to to engage in opposition to them, specifically because of where they were and what they were doing. I don't think there was a Pussy Hat March going on at the same time. There was another protest going on. I think the other groups of guys that were there were part of that protest, but it wasn't a women's march. It was just, other politics. But this kind of man versus man, groups of men versus groups of men, and men engaging in attacks and violence against each other uh, on the basis of issues and stuff like this, that does trace back to trying to protect their women from those guys over there, those men over there. And these boys found out what it was like to be those men over there. The other thing I want to say about this is, um, it doesn't matter whether you are pro or anti-Trump. What I'm about to say is true regardless. And if the hats were the opposite, if there were, what was it? What is Obama's slogan? Hope and change. If somebody showed up in a hope and change T-shirt, it would not be right to treat them. If this had been a pro-abortion rally and there were a bunch of guys standing around in hope and change T-shirts, and somebody took offense at that and considered it to be, I don't know, like anti-Christian or anti-white or whatever, for whatever reason, that wouldn't make it true of those guys. And if somebody's got a MAGA hat on, you're not entitled, to decide for him what that hat means to him, and what.
Brian, we're getting a lot of background.
Yeah, a lot of
Sorry,
background noise.
I'll mute.
Sorry. What is on his mind and what he's expressing with it. Like, how you feel about what you see does not determine the intentions of the person that you're looking at. No matter what side of the political spectrum you're on, no matter how strong your feelings are about the particular piece of propaganda, and the MAGA hat is a piece of propaganda. It's an infographic, right? It's intended to show people I stand by Trump, but that's not really a whole lot of information. But no matter how strongly you feel about the piece of propaganda you're looking at, your feelings only reflect on you. And there hasn't actually been any reason, and anything at all that has been done by supporters of either side that would justify responding to campaign paraphernalia like that. Whether it's Make America Great Again hats or Hope and Change T-shirts, they're all just team sportswear, for politics. It'd be like getting mad at somebody for wearing a Bengals hat and saying, well, you know, you support dog fighting because there was a guy, that got busted for that. So obviously that's what the Bengals are all about now, and that's what you support if you're a Bengals fan. And same thing with any other sports team. No, it's bullshit. What that might
Yeah.
mean to that person is entirely up to that person. And yet, when it's specifically just Trump, all of a sudden everybody has the right to define that for you. And all of a sudden, feelings mean more than facts. And all of a sudden, how you make yourself feel from the inside about what you see constitutes somebody else's aggression against you. And yet, they're accusing the kid of having privilege, and the individual with the power to define his thoughts and feelings and to label him aggressive for just standing there. That's the victim. I mean, that's where we are in our society right now.
Yep. Okay, well, Allison is going to be making a video that will go into this a lot more in depth. So you guys should be on the lookout on the main channel, Honey Badger Radio, for that. Is there anybody else who has any final thoughts on this story or any of the other stories? I always give you guys a chance to say something if there's anything that you didn't get a chance to speak to. Nope? Okay. So we're going to go ahead and get out of here. And we're going to be going to the after show to look at this gift that fell into my lap at the last minute from Vice.com. It's not really that new now that I look at it. It's from last year, but I'm going to read it anyway because it doesn't have to be current to be great. It's confirmed women are higher beings. New study shows how men's brains are geared towards selfishness and women's brains towards kindness. Now we just got to figure out how the fuck that works. So if you want to be a part of that, you got to become a badger. To do that, you have to go to... You can go to patreon.com/honeybadgerradio, or you can go to Feed the Badger and set up a monthly subscription. I think that you can even do like little temporary ones, like if you want to pop in for a while and sort of demo the Discord, but it gives you access to our Discord. It also, lets you access all of the other content. We do bonus shows. We also have behind the scenes types things, like occasionally, let's say Alison is working on a show and she wants to run it by the patrons. They get to see it first and also add commentary, maybe make suggestions, things like that. So if you want to be a part of it, that's what you got to do. Go to feedthebadger.com or go to patreon.com/honeybadgerradio. With that said, I'm going to go ahead and go into the after show. Thanks, guys, for coming on this episode of the HBR News Show. My name has been Brian. It has been. It probably will be tomorrow, so I guess don't take it literally. And I would also thank Mike, and Hannah for coming on. Be sure to hit that like button, give us a sub, and leave a comment. We'll talk to you guys in the very next video really soon. I hope I survive the night and don't freeze to death. I'll talk to you guys later.